I'm Betty. Welcome to my kitchen. Welcome to part 5 of our dinner party menu. For a lot of people, the best part of any dinner, dessert. And I think I have a winner for you in my chocolate Amaretti Torte. It's a delicious chocolate cake, and it's not fussy, you don't have to frost it. And we're going to start by greasing our cake pan and lining it with parchment paper. My favorite way to do this is using a silicone pastry brush with some soft butter, which I always have on hand. And this makes such quick work of it. You want to do the bottom and of course the sides. Just a little dab there. Make sure you get into the edge to make releasing the cake nice and easy. Once that's done, you're going to line your pan with a circle of parchment paper. This is a 10-inch pan. I think you can get pre-cut, but I don't use this pan very often, so I simply cut out a circle from a sheet of parchment paper. And once that's in, you're going to give that a quick butter. Don't miss this step. It's really important in ensuring that your cake will release easily and neatly. Now on to the ingredients. I've got a ½ cup of cocoa powder, a teaspoon of instant espresso coffee powder, a ¼ cup of amaretto liqueur. I'm using 5 eggs, which I've separated. Eggs are easiest to separate when they're cold, but the whites beat up with more volume when they're allowed to come to room temperature. And when I beat those egg whites, I'm going to incorporate a ¼ teaspoon of cream of tartar. What that does essentially is stabilize the egg whites. I'm using ½ cup of Italian Amaretti cookies, which I've crushed just by placing in a plastic bag and fairly finely crushing, I would say, with a rolling pin. And then I'm using 2 cups of almond flour. The final ingredients I have already in my mixer. I've got ½ pound of butter at room temperature and 1 3/4 cup of sugar. I'm going to start the process by beating the butter and sugar in the mixer on medium-high speed for about 2 minutes until it looks nice and light and fluffy. That looks just perfect. Now I'm using the flex blade on my machine. If I didn't have that, I would have stopped a couple of times and scraped the bowl down. So I'm going to proceed with the other ingredients. I'm just going to add this coffee powder to the amaretto liqueur and give it a stir to dissolve. We'll be adding this to our cake just a little later. Next, I'm going to add my egg yolks, one at a time, I hope. So we're just going to add the remaining ingredients. The Amaretti crumbs, the cocoa powder, the almond flour, and the Amaretti liqueur with the coffee powder pretty much dissolved in there. Just give this a mix to combine. Okay, now the next step is to beat our egg whites. My favorite spot to whip anything with a whisk that might possibly spatter or go all over the place is my sink. It's also more comfortable for my hand rather than having to hold a whisk way up high over the counter. So these are my 5 egg whites and my 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar, which I'm just going to sprinkle over the top. And I'll start beating these at a medium speed and then increase to high. I want these to come to a stiff peak, but I'm not going to whisk them until they're dry. There, that's what's called a stiff peak. Anytime you're incorporating egg whites into anything, be it an omelet, a souffle, a cake, whatever, you want to start by taking about 1/4 to 1/3 of your egg whites and stirring them into your batter. That loosens it up and it'll allow you to fold in the rest, keeping the airy quality of the egg whites. Just give this a stir. This is a fairly stiff batter, and this little bit of egg white is really going to loosen it up. Okay, now that that's in, I'm going to fold in the rest of these. Just use the classic folding technique. Over and getting a little bit in each time. Make sure you scoop up from the bottom of your bowl. All right, now that my egg whites are all folded in, I'm going to transfer this batter to my cake pan. I've got my oven preheated at 350 degrees. And this is going to bake for about 45 to 50 minutes until a cake tester comes out with perhaps just 1 or 2 little moist crumbs clinging to it. And the other way you can tell when a cake is done, or almost anything, is by smelling it. It smells done. The aroma fills your kitchen, and you know whatever it is you're cooking or baking is pretty much guaranteed to be ready. So there we go. And give it a quick smooth. Now this is quite a large cake. If you wanted to make it for a smaller group, what you can do is either cut the ingredients in half and bake it in a 7-inch cake pan, or use the full amount, bake 2 cakes, and freeze one to have for another day. A great little treasure to have in your freezer, perhaps for unexpected guests, or someday when you just really need a wonderful chocolate treat. There, that looks pretty good. I do want it nice and smooth for the finished product. There. All set to go into the oven. All right, my cake has tested done. Another good way to tell that a cake is done is when it pulls away from the edge of the cake pan just slightly. As you can see, it's done there. I'm going to transfer this over to my stovetop to let it cool, and I'm going to turn it out onto a rack to finish cooling. Once the cake has cooled, as I said, for about 10 to 15 minutes, you want to take a spatula and run it around the edge of the cake. Make sure it's all loose. And then just put a cooling rack on top and flip it over. And there it is. I don't even have to peel the parchment off, it stayed in the pan. So now I'm going to reverse that since I don't want to have lines on the top once this cools. Flip it back over, and it's going to sit there until it's cooled completely, when I'll transfer it to my serving dish and finish it off with some powdered sugar. Now that my cake is completely cool, I'm going to finish decorating it. The decoration is just going to be some powdered sugar. Just putting this little stencil that I made on top. Give it a little flourish. So all this requires is a little shaker of powdered sugar. If you don't have one of these, just put it in a little sieve and sift it over. It just gives it a little finish. There we are. And I'll just carefully take my finger and lift my stencil off. And there. Everybody knows it's a cake made by Betty. Now the bottom is going to stick slightly, so what I suggest is taking a cookie sheet, just easing that under the cake. And transfer it over to your cake plate. It should slide off quite easily now. There we go. All that needs now when we serve it is a little whipped cream and maybe a couple of raspberries.